So I think it's clear to all that throughout the past few months with everything that's been going on in the world, I have been acquiring more books than usual, and I feel no guilt. We're all just trying to get through. So I've got another book haul for you. So in that slightly terrifying but exciting pile, I have some books that I've bought, some books that I was gifted, and some books that were sent to me for review. So as always, I try to start with the books I bought myself and then move on to the different sections so you know where I acquired them all. So like I said, let's crack on with the books that I've bought myself. Oh my goodness, I just realised I should be hauling my own book. 1 second. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this book because I've mentioned it in other videos, but technically I did haul it in this period, so it should be included, and I did buy it myself, and that is my book. I did buy this, although technically I bought it for my mum. But this is a book that I wrote the words in. It is called Greek Myths, Meet the Heroes, Gods and Monsters of Ancient Greece, and it is a children's non-fiction introduction to Greek myth and a little bit about Greek or ancient Greek culture and religion and life. So it tells all the different stories, a lot of the classics that you might have heard before, but also some that I felt were a little bit less well known, but equally as important and really interesting, and helped build a larger picture about Greek mythology and Greek culture, as well as details about all the different gods and the dominions that they were sort of in charge of, as well as like why these myths were so important to the ancient Greeks and how they shared them with one another. And it is illustrated by the phenomenal Katie Ponder. Like, look at these illustrations. This is the myth of the flood, which I think is one of those ones that not as many people know about, but there's definitely parallels there to other myths from other cultures with floods about restarting the human race. And then we have like Eros and Psyche. I've only opened blue pages somehow. Here we go. These are some of the gods. We have Athena and Ares, who have their own page each with lots of details about them, and I think it's stunning. I didn't do the artwork, so I feel like it's not vain to say that, but I am just so in awe that I have this book that literally has my name on the front. I've wanted to be a published author since I was 7 years old, and I obviously have a deep, deep passion for this topic because it's what I'm doing my PhD in. Not specifically children's mythology, but I have spent 10 years of my life studying this subject, and promoting it to wider audiences is something that I've always wanted to do and have been doing, but this is like a new way to do it. So I just had the most fun doing this book with DK, who have published it, and I just had to mention it because technically I did haul it. So there we go, mentioned that. Now let's move on to the books that I didn't write. So I did actually buy myself a fair few books recently. But let's talk about what I bought. I actually had my first ever trip to a bookshop recently. My friend Jill and I met up, socially distanced, mask wearing, constantly hand sanitising on a weekday, and went to a bookshop in the morning when it wasn't too busy, and it felt very calm, it felt very well prepared, and I felt very comfortable there, and I was really worried I wouldn't. I was really worried I'd feel very anxious, but it was actually a really pleasant experience. And my friend Jill and I obviously ended up buying some books. So the books that I bought during our trip include this one, which is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I bought this in Toppings, which is an independent bookshop chain. Like, there's a few of them throughout the UK, and one in Edinburgh opened last year, and it was so lovely in there. This is a horror novel, basically. It's set in the 1950s in Mexico, and it draws on a lot of classic Gothic themes from traditional Gothic horror, where our protagonist is a young socialite whose cousin was married recently, about a year ago or so, and they've recently received a letter from her cousin, her and her father, indicating that not all is well, that something is wrong in her new home, and that potentially her husband is a danger to her, or that she's just ill and perhaps losing her mind a little bit. So our protagonist is sent to investigate and check in on her cousin and the life she's leading in a very rural, cut-off mansion house, and of course it just gets creepier as we go along. I'm actually reading this one at the moment. I'm almost finished it, and will probably have finished it by the time you see this video, but I am really, really enjoying it. I'd never read anything by this author before, and it's had a lot of hype since it came out, and I think if you're into this genre, it totally lives up to that hype. It very much reminds me of Shirley Jackson and Daphne du Maurier, and I cannot wait to see how it concludes. I also hope that potentially this author will keep writing sort of horror in the future, because it definitely like sort of ticks my horror boxes for what I look for. And yeah, really enjoying this one. I then also picked up, completely on a whim in toppings, Waking the Witch by Kelly Armstrong, which I'd never heard of before, but just thought sounded like a lot of fun. And I noticed on the bookshelf there was like tons of books by this author, maybe 10 or something like that. So she's obviously written quite a lot, and I'd never heard of her, so it's going to be fun. If I like this book, I've obviously got a whole host of other titles to check out. And it is a thriller crime novel, but also paranormal. So we have a town in America where 3 women have been murdered, and there is potentially a serial killer out there doing ritualistic killings. And then we have a detective, I think she's a private investigator, who is a witch, and she has to investigate. And that just sounds fantastic. So I'm hoping I like this author in this book. Okay, that's actually a review copy that I've got mixed in there. And then I actually have 3 books I got in the charity shop. So I only went to the charity shop to drop off a bunch of things that my mum and I were getting rid of. But, you know, I was already in there. They had loads of hand sanitizer. It was very quiet. Nobody else was there. And I spotted this little collection of books, which are a mass market paperback fantasy trilogy, which are basically my calling cards, also written by women. So like mass market fantasy paperbacks written by women are like something that I cannot help to be drawn to. And like I said, it's a trilogy, so it is books 1, 2 and 3 in a series, but they were only £1 for all 3 together, so I couldn't resist. Book 1 is Time of Twins, which is volume 1 in the Dragonlance Legends series by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. We then have book 2, which is Test of Twins, and book 3, which is War of the Twins. Okay, things clearly escalate. I, to be honest, didn't think too hard about purchasing these at £1 for what is something that I usually quite enjoy, traditional fantasy with female protagonists written by women with very cheesy covers, so thought, hey, why not? Let's learn what they're about together in that case. Book 1. One man, the powerful archmage Raistlin, intends that the darkness shall return. 2 people alone can stop him. Christina, a beautiful cleric of good, and Caramon, Raistlin's twin brother, who must first understand himself before he can redeem his brother. Together with Tasselhoff, the irrepressible Kender, the 3 of them embark on a perilous journey back through time to the days before the Cataclysm. Please let me know if you've ever read these books or anything else by these authors. I also had £10 on my Waterstones card to spend, so I placed an order on Waterstones. But when you order 1 book, you then also have to order 3 more. That's not actually a requirement, but that's how it felt to me. So I did end up getting 4. The first one I've already read, so it should have been in my July reading wrap up, and it is a manga. It's super cute. One-shot manga, so it's not a series, called I Married My Best Friend to Shut My Parents Up. Story and art by Kodama Naoko, and I believe this author actually writes a lot of like female romances in her manga. I'd never read anything by her before, but I'd be interested to check more of them out. Plus just more of that theme. If you know of more like queer women in manga series, I would love to pick them up. This one is pretty self-explanatory from the title. It is about 2 women who end up having what is more of a civil partnership according to the laws where they live in their part of Japan. I'm not really familiar with Japanese like gay marriage laws, but it seems to be a civil partnership, and that's because one of them's parents just keep insisting that she gets married to a man, and she's so sick of it. So her friend who's gay says, hey, well, I need somewhere to live, let's just get married, that'll shut your parents up, and of course they end up falling in love. It's super cute, super short, kind of silly, but I enjoyed reading it. We then also have a crime novel, which is Bluebird by Attica Locke. So I've never read any of Attica Locke's crime novels before, but I've heard fantastic things from people online and in real life. She seems to be a big hit in this kind of genre. This has a male detective called Darren Matthews, a black Texas Ranger working in the backwoods town of Highway 59, and it seems that 2 dead bodies end up washing up in the bayou, and he has to solve that mystery. I believe it's more literary crime. That's the sort of vibe I've gathered from other people's reviews, which is something I'm super into, and like I said, I've heard fantastic things about Attica Locke, so it would be really nice to try one of her books finally. We then have, because like I've mentioned multiple times, I'm really on a dark horror kick, My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This is another author that I've heard brilliant things about, even from my mum. So you might remember a few years ago a book came out called Horror Store, which is a horror novel set in a sort of IKEA type shop, and it's laid out like an IKEA catalogue. The design is really funky. And she loved that book. She thought it was like quite like humorous horror, and I've always meant to read something by him myself, but she lent that book to a friend and it never turned back up, so I didn't get a chance to read that one, and thought this also sounded fun. It's meant to look like an old 80s VHS tape, which again is a really funky design. I like the way his books are designed, and this one is about high school sophomores Abby and Gretchen, who have been best friends since 4th grade, but after an evening of skinny dipping goes disastrously wrong, Gretchen begins to act different. She's moody, she's irritable and bizarre. Incidents keep happening whenever she's nearby. I believe it's about an possession and a need for exorcism, as the title implies, but it's another one which I kind of just picked up on the basis of hearing good things about the author. We then, another one that I purely picked up on the basis of everyone raving about this author, is The 100,000 Kingdoms, book 1 of the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. So everybody loves N.K. Jemisin. I have not heard a bad word about N.K. Jemisin, and that makes me really excited. This isn't the book that people usually recommend to me, which is the 5th season, but I really like the sound of this plot summary, so I ended up just going with my gut and hope I made the right decision. It's a fantasy book, the first in a series, and it's about Yen Dar, who is an outcast from the barbarian north. But when her mother dies under mysterious circumstances, she is summoned to the majestic city of Sky, a palace above the clouds where the lives of gods and mortals intertwine. Love a sort of fantasy novel that weaves gods into their storylines. There, to her shock, Yen is named one of the potential heirs to the king, but the throne of the 100,000 Kingdoms is not easily won, and Yen is thrust into a vicious power struggle with a pair of cousins she never knew she had. Again, just sounds really interesting, and I'm hoping I made the right call picking this one up by this author, but I'm sure I'm gonna love her. Everyone loves her. Then I did order a book from Blackwell's because I was ordering my mum a book that she wanted, and I was like, if I'm placing an order anyway. I bought myself Lilith's Brood by Octavia E. Butler. Now, the reason I was really inspired to pick this up recently is twofold. One, really been trying to pick up like horror written by women, and this is one of Octavia Butler's more creepy horror novels that she's written, and my mum recently read Kindred for the first time, which is a book by this author that I adore, and her sort of excitement over that book really pushed me to want to pick up something else by the author because I've only ever read that one story. So not only is this horror, but it is also sci-fi. It's set in a future on Earth when Earth is basically being destroyed and everyone's died, when our character Lilith is resurrected by an alien race who have come to Earth and are driven by the need to heal others, so are able to bring the dead back to life. And Lilith is one of these resurrected humans who now must coexist with the aliens. I don't know much else about it than that. Love this author though, really excited to try something else by her. It's also a chunky one, so it should be really meaty to get my teeth sunk into, and that, I think, brings me to all the books I bought myself. But then we have a book my friend actually passed along to me, so this was completely free, they were getting rid of it, and it is Artemis by Andy Weir. So the reason I decided to take this off their hands is because I really enjoyed the film adaptation of this author's other book, which is The Martian, starring that man that my mum fancies, Matt Damon. Starring Matt Damon. Martian, I thought The Martian was a phenomenal film. Really enjoyed it when I went to see it in the cinema. And I feel like I'm not that drawn to reading the book because I know everything that happens, and I think that would interfere with my reading of it, but I would be intrigued to read something else by the author since they created something so powerful in The Martian. And this is another sci-fi novel, this time called Artemis, which is set much further in the future than The Martian, in fact on a moon that is now populated by humans with a population of around 2,000. And I've also been really getting into sci-fi recently, so I've always been a hardcore fantasy fan, but I've never read quite as much sci-fi. And I've not always known where to start, but I've read a few sci-fi novels recently and adored them, particularly books by Becky Chambers. So it's really made me want to read more sci-fi. I feel very much in a sci-fi mood, so hopefully this will feed that need. And then in fact, on the topic of sci-fi and Becky Chambers, I was sent some very thoughtful gifts. So these first two books, which were gifted to me, were sent anonymously via my wish list, so I don't know your name. Please let me know if it was you though. I think I shared these on Instagram, but I also respect if you want to remain anonymous. But I am so grateful. These were such thoughtful gifts. And the first one is A Closed and Common Orbit, which is book 2 in Becky Chambers' series, the first one of which I read in July. My review will have been in my wrap-up, and it's one of my favourite books of the year. I adored it, it lived up to all the hype in my opinion, and I'm so glad that my friend Tasman gifted me that one so that I finally read it, because it was perfection, and I am so excited to read more books by this author set in this universe. So this is also set in the same world. It's in a very distant future in space, but it follows different characters. So her books are very character focused, and that was why I loved the first one. This, however, follows new characters, kind of. They are not characters that were the main characters in book 1, but they are characters that did appear as side characters in book 1 and now are the main characters of their own story. So really excited to follow them and the development of their characters and their lives and their thoughts and their feelings. And all in all, I'm just super grateful to have been sent this, because like I said, I adored book 1. I was then also very kindly gifted Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, which is the first in one of Robin Hobb's very, very many series. This is book 1 of the live ship traders, and I am so excited about this. So Robin Hobb's Rainwild Chronicles, which is set in the same fantasy world as this series, is one of my favourite series of all time, one of my favourite fantasy series of all time. It is focused on dragons, and I love it, I adore it. But I've never read any of her other series. I've read some of her short stories and standalones, but never any of her other series. And I've always sort of been questioning which one to go for next. I know that the Rainwild Chronicles, which is the one I've already read, isn't the first series in the series of series, but I don't care. I know some people really feel like you should read all the series chronologically, but they also stand by themselves, and I'd rather read the ones that I'm drawn to the plots of, because that's the kind of reader I am. I don't care about spoilers. So this is also not the first series in the realm of the Elderlings, but it's another one I think that maybe comes before the Rainwild Chronicles. And we did meet some of the live ship traders, or the men that worked on live ships in the Rainwells. So this is just perfect because it's been picked for me. Now I don't need to wonder anymore which series to read next, and I'm so excited to start this. It's also another chunky one, so again, so grateful, so overwhelmed. I was also then sent 2 more books. Like, I just don't know how to express adequate gratitude to these, but the note that came with these 2 books was so thoughtful, and again, I was just really overwhelmed when I received it. So thank you so much for your kind words. And these were gifts from Olivia, who, I don't know if everyone's just psychic right now, because also bought me another book by Becky Chambers. So this is a novella set in the same universe as the series that I previously mentioned, called To Be Taught If Fortunate. And again, I believe we're set in the same world, but we follow completely different characters in this book. And I believe this one's specifically about a character called Ariadne, who is involved in making the Earth habitable again. It stopped being habitable to humans, and they're trying to like restore it. So again, just so excited to have all these Becky Chambers books to read. I loved The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. We then also have Braised Pork by Anne Yu. This was actually a book my friend Jen was reading recently and really enjoying, so I ended up adding it to my wish list. And it says in the back, one morning in autumn, just after breakfast, Gia finds her husband dead in the bathtub of their Beijing apartment. Next to him is a piece of folded paper, a sketch of a strange creature from his dream. He has left her no other sign. Young, alone, and with many unanswered questions, Gia sets out on a journey. It takes her deep into her past, where for the first time she begins to have a sense of her future. So I believe this is a literary novel, potentially with quite dark themes, given what's happened to the main character's husband, and I'm just really excited about it. So yeah, those are the books that were given to me as gifts. Which brings us to the final part of this haul, which is books that were sent to me for review by the publishers. So to start off this section, we have a book that was actually in my most anticipated releases for the second half of 2020, and that is Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. This is a futuristic dystopian story inspired by Cinderella. So it's set in a world where the Cinderella fairy tale took place, But after the Cinderella fairy tale took place, this society adopted a new system whereby women at the age of 18, I think, or at a certain age, maybe 16, 17, have to attend a ball and find themselves a husband. And if they don't find themselves a husband, they disappear, which is incredibly foreboding. And we follow our protagonist, who is far more interested in other young women than she is in young men. So that obviously makes choosing a man at one of these balls a bit of a problem. And like I said, it was one of my most anticipated releases. I've also been hearing fantastic things about it since review copies have been sent out. I don't think the book itself is actually out yet. It got pushed back a little bit, so comes out in August, and all in all, I'm just so excited about this. It is YA as well, if I didn't mention. We then have another book that I think was in that anticipated releases video. If it wasn't, it should have been. And that is We Are All the Same in the Dark. This is a proof copy of Julia Heberlin's new book. Now, Julia Heberlin writes thrillers, and I've read 3 of her books in the past, but one in particular is one of my favourite thrillers of all time, and that is Black-Eyed Susans. So because of how impressed I was with that book, it means that I am always here to try whatever she brings out next. And this is a new thriller by her, and this is about a town where a girl goes missing, and everyone believes that her brother is responsible for her going missing. But then I believe it's 10 years later when this brother finds another like dazed, confused, missing, lost girl all alone, and he takes this as a sign to help him clear his name. I'm not sure exactly how. Maybe he thinks that this girl's background may be connected to his sister's, but we then follow that mystery, both of the original missing girl and this new lost girl who maybe has no memories, and whether or not this young man is involved and his attempts at clearing his name and solving what has happened. And like I said, I really enjoyed Black-Eyed Susans, so I'm excited to read another thriller by this author. We then have a book that I didn't request and actually just like turned up in the post miraculously, but it actually sounds really good, so I decided to keep a hold of it. It is Feather Tide by Beth Cartwright. And first up, I mean, stunning, beautiful cover, hardback. This, you know, would make me pick it up in a bookshop anyway, but I'll read you the blurb since that was and is all I know about it. It's about Maria, who has always known she was different. She was born covered in the feathers of a bird and kept hidden in a crumbling house full of secrets and unanswered questions. Longing to discover the truth behind her origins, she goes in search of the father she has never met. Her curiosity leads her to the city of Murmurs, a place of mermaids and mystery where jars of swirling mist are carried through the streets by the broken-hearted. And Maria will never forget what she finds there. Sounds intriguing? I think so. So looking forward to reading this. We then have a new edition of an old book, and that is Sabriel by Garth Nix. So this is a YA fantasy novel that I've heard amazing things about, particularly from my friend Sana. This is one of her favourite series of all time, and she's been encouraging me to read it for quite a few years. But from what I understand, Garth Nix has a new book coming out set in this world, so Hotkey have reissued some of his older books in these lovely new editions, including Sabriel, which is the first in a series. And when they offered me a review copy, I was like, okay, yeah, you know, Sana would want me to take it, so I should. It also sounds really fun, and I have heard great things from other readers. In essence, it's about Sabriel, a young woman in a magical world who has to save her father. We then, last but not least, for this haul and for books sent by publishers, have The Lost City by Amanda Hocking. This is another fantasy novel because I am that predictable, and it's another one that just sounds so interesting. It's about Ulla Tulin, who was abandoned as a baby and raised amongst the canon, like many half-blood trolls. I love fantasy novels where the protagonists are not human or not fully human. So in this book, we seem to have a half troll. Though she was hidden because of her heritage, she never forgot her origins. So when Ulla is hired by an institution that helps those like her, she's delighted. She teams up with handsome Pan Soriano, a half-human researcher. However, their efforts to find her family are blocked when it seems Ulla has royal connections. They think helping amnesiac Eliana and her own unique gift may be more successful. But as Ulla and Pan dig deeper, they find someone will do anything to keep these mysteries hidden. I mean, if that doesn't sound good to you, then, you know, we probably just don't have the same taste in fantasy, but it sounds great to me. So those are all of the books I had to show you in this haul. I'm surrounded, as I know many of us are right now, by books, but to be honest, that's quite a happy place to be. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these or are interested in reading any of these, and until next time, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone!